Welcome to the December edition of the OAR program, Aging with Expectation. Today's topic is, I think, a very good one. The topic is the three essential gifts for Christmas you can't buy in a store. Personally, I'm really looking forward to hearing what those gifts are, because maybe I can get some somewhere. Anyway, without further ado, let's hand over to Dr. Francis Macnab and Dr. Steven Koski. Thank you.
Francis, I read recently that's when the dust settles from this global pandemic, we will realize how little we actually need and how very much we actually have, and the true value of human connection. I really love that sense of maybe we might realize how little we need, how much we have, and the true value of human connection. I mean, I hear people talk a lot about, wanting to get back to the way things were, wanting to get back to normal. And maybe we don't want to get back to normal because there were probably aspects of normal that were unhealthy, unhelpful, destructive. I think this pandemic has revealed a lot of tears in the fabric of our life together. I remember you saying once, I always get a bit afraid when people say, I remember when you said, but I do remember you saying once that humans are the only animals that speed up when we're lost. And so I'm wondering if this pandemic, as difficult as it has been, I'm wondering if it's forced us to slow down, to have moments where we remember who we are and to reflect on what matters most. I mean, I think of those words from the German philosopher Van Goethe, who said the things that matter most are always at the mercy of the things that matter least. I was never a very good student in Greek, but I do remember that the Greek word, the Greek root of the word crisis means to sift, as in to kind of shake, to sift, to shake out all the excesses and leave only what's important. So I'm curious if that's what crises do, that they shake things up until we're left holding what matters most, that the rest kind of falls away. So what do you think about this time of pandemic? As certainly it's been a time of tragedy and profound grief. But maybe it's also been a time where we've been forced to slow down, to reflect on what's essential, to reflect on what matters most in life. What do you think?
Well, what does matter most? Most of all, we like to be in contact with each other. How can we make contact? How can we sustain good contact? Because if we lose contact, or if we deny the contact, we're missing out on a very important part of what human relationships are about: being in contact, making a connection, having a good connection, positive, pleasing, what enriches us, a positive connection.
And I really love that. Apparently there are like 22 shopping days left till Christmas.
Have you counted?
And I wonder, what are those gifts that you won't find in the store? What are those gifts that you won't find under the tree? And what I hear you saying is maybe what matters most, or at least one of the things that matters most, is somehow finding a way to move from conflict or even combat to connection, to being present with one another. And so I'm really curious if one of the essential gifts that we can offer each other this Christmas is the gift of our presence. I mean, we often talk about wanting to buy the perfect present for those we love. Maybe the best gift is the gift of our presence, a positive presence. I mean, I learned this from you, to engage with the myth of Christmas, to engage with the story with curiosity and wonder. I mean, you really helped me encounter Scripture in a very imaginative way, as opposed to looking at the story as history. What if we looked at the story as mystery and using our imagination? And I think of the character of Joseph. You know, I was thinking about the character of Joseph, you know, engaged to Mary. What's interesting in the story, isn't it interesting that throughout the whole story, Joseph doesn't say a word. He doesn't actually utter one word, but you can feel his presence. So it makes me kind of curious to wonder, I wonder what kind of presence Joseph was to Jesus. You know, when Jesus, I can't remember where that was in Scripture, but when he reached for a metaphor to describe the nature of God's heart, the nature of God's love, he used the word Abba, which I believe is best translated Papa. So it makes me kind of curious and wonder, was Jesus thinking about the presence of Joseph when he used that word describing God in such a way of tenderness and intimacy? You know, and I think the story that many people are familiar with, you know, the story of the wayward son that we call the prodigal son, you know, the son who runs away and wants to return home. And when he's returning home, now I can imagine, it doesn't say in the story, but I can imagine him on the road rehearsing his apology in his head, hoping that he'd be forgiven, hoping that he'd be welcomed home. The story kind of suggests that the father in the story never stopped watching, waiting, hoping the son would return. And the story says the father sees him at a distance and he runs out to greet him. And before the son could even utter one word of apology, it says the father wrapped his arms around him, welcome home, and says, let's have a feast. So as Jesus described this story about a father's love, a father's presence, was he thinking about Joseph when he described this presence, this forgiving, merciful, patient, expansive, positive presence? So I wonder about Joseph and the gift of his presence. And then I wonder about my own presence in the world. I've been wondering about that a lot lately. Just had a birthday recently, so I'm wondering about my presence in the world. How am I present to others? How am I present to others in a way that enriches them? Or am I present to others in a way that diminishes them? I read Henry Nouwen said, the hardest spiritual work in the world is to be present. To be a presence of love without the need to judge, fix, control, convert, convince, save. Just be present. So what do you think about that? What do you think about one of the most essential gifts that we can offer one another is the gift of our presence?
I suppose we need to have some qualifying words, because sometimes a presence can be an angry presence. A presence can be a remembering the wrong things. So we want the presence to be a good presence, a positive presence, a presence that moves towards each other. In fact, sometimes I speak of the three possibilities: moving towards somebody, moving away from somebody, moving against them. Those three possibilities are there all the time. How do we move towards each other, in an affirming manner, in a pleasing way? Moving towards, because moving away from each other, we're putting distance between myself and the other, or moving against the other person is being perhaps angry or distance. We're putting distance between us. So how to be present to each other in a very positive way. That's a strong part of the Christmas story, in fact, is the moving towards the other. In celebration, moving towards the other in a positive, affirming manner. To be present and say, there we are. We want to be towards each other, for each other, not against each other. So Christmas is being present in an affirming, enjoyable way.
I mean, I love that. I love that. I never really considered the father in that story Jesus told. I never really considered it in terms of how he moved towards, because the story, as the writer of the story says, that the father sees the son from a distance, that the father doesn't actually wait passively until the son arrives, the son gets to the porch. It says the father literally runs out and moves towards him. Yeah, that's beautiful. And moves towards him. The son had some anxiety, some hesitation. Am I going to be welcomed? And it says the son moved towards him with acceptance, moved towards him with forgiveness, moved towards him with the spirit of welcome. So it makes me wonder about one of the practices, in this season is to think about our intentionality with the people in our lives. So how can we move towards them with a good spirit, move towards them with a spirit that will uplift them, affirm them.
We all need that again and again. People to move towards each other in an affirming, joyous way.
Yeah.
The father and the son move towards each other with pleasure, with hope, with expectation. The more we can do that, I think first of all, we're better people, and we're better in our relationships with each other.
Yeah.
Do you?
And I'm curious too whether that's connected to another essential gift I think we can extend to one another, which you won't find under a tree or you can't buy in a store. And that's a chance to just pause and reflect, a chance to get away from the chaos and the hurry and the activity and the hustle and the bustle, and just kind of create space where we might think about the way we move towards others, how we can change in the way that we move towards each other. I think one of the most important gifts, I think, for ourselves and others is peace. In the midst of all of the chaos is I would even say silence. That in our world, in our society, this time of year particularly, there seems to be so much noise, so much frantic activity, so many people schedule so much. I'm struck by theologian and poet John O'Donohue, where he said, "We travel too fast over false ground. And now your soul in silence has come to take you back." And I love what he says. He says, "Draw alongside silence until it silences you." I love that. Draw alongside silence until it silences you, until calmness, he wrote, claims you. Be excessively gentle with yourself, he said, and gradually you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart. And he said, and you'll discover the joy, the joy that dwells within slow time. And then he said, the world cannot ruffle the dignity of a soul that dwells in its own tranquility. So what do you think of that? The world cannot ruffle the dignity of a soul that dwells within its own tranquility. So how about in the season of so much activity and lights and noise and scheduling, what about just giving ourselves the gift of peace and silence?
Well, include that other word as well, tranquility.
Yeah.
You use it. It's a good word. And we have to think, tranquility. Where can we find it? How can we practice it? Will we be better for it? Will other people be better for it? If we can discover in ourselves and in the other, and between ourselves and the other, the in-between, a tranquility, a being together in quietness, enjoying the quietness. Because often we don't enjoy our quietness. We want to talk, we want to yell, we want to get agitated, but to be quiet.
Yeah.
Be still.
Yeah.
Can we do that? We can do it. It's a great gift, but it needs practice. Practice, practice, practice.
I have an English cream retriever, and when he was a puppy, and I had a trainer to help kind of get some fundamentals down. And the trainer said, "I can tell you what your biggest mistake is. You are trying to match the energy of your puppy." So when the puppy was jumping up and down and all kind of this kind of hyper energy, in my attempt to have the puppy settle down, my energy was the same. Quiet, sit, quiet down, So my energy was matching the energy I wanted to change. And the trainer said, the best gift you can give your puppy, she didn't say tranquility, but I think that's what she meant, is tranquility. She said, I guarantee you, if you stay calm, your puppy's energy will change and eventually match yours. And she was right. So it's amazing if we can actually find that tranquility within ourselves. I think the impact we can have on the anxiety around us.
It's infectious, in fact. A tranquility that is infectious. It breathes in the space between us. And for him, the space between, breathe the tranquility we're looking for, we'd like to have, with different people.
I love that image of image of the tranquility breathes in the space between us. I mean, that is so powerful, because I often talk about how our anxiety, I often say that our anxiety exists in our first breath that we hold in our chest and our shoulders, you know, where our chest is tight and our shoulders are up by our ears and our breathing is really shallow and rapid. That if we can take a second deeper breath, and I love that if we can find that peace, that tranquility, that quiet, and take a second deep breath, and then that tranquility will then breathe in the space between you and others. I'm going to steal that one from you. That's fantastic.
The important thing is that we allow these things to flow from us and to flow into us. Flow out, flow in. So let it happen. And that makes a huge difference to what kind of people we'll be and what our relationships will be like.
And that's where I think you had mentioned earlier about the importance of practice. And if we can practice silence, and that might mean different things for different people. For me, it might be just being still. For another person, it might be through music or going for a walk. I read the story of this elementary teacher, a second grade teacher, where she asked her second graders to make as much noise as they possibly can. So if you can imagine a classroom of second graders being given permission to make as much noise as they possibly can. Sheer chaos. But then she asked them to describe the noise. And what she noticed is most of the second graders described the noise using cliches, like the sound of thunder, the beating of drums, the herd of elephants. You know, not much imagination. And then she asked these second graders, be still. Be as silent as you possibly can. Then after a time of silence, she asked them to describe the silence. And she was shocked, second graders, how the silence seemed to liberate their imaginations. She said one second grader described silence as a tree reaching its branches to the sun. I mean, another second grader described silence as me sleeping just before I wake. And another second grader described silence as silence reminds me to take my soul everywhere I go. And I think of Thomas Merton said, what did he say? He said, silence is God's first language. Everything else is a poor translation. So how do we practice? I mean, we sing a song this time of year, Silent Night, Holy Night, suggesting that maybe silence helps us awaken to the holiness, helps us awaken to what matters most. How do you think we practice that silence?
Well, many people find it very difficult because we're always so busy, or feeling we need to talk, or to go, or to be, always activity. But here we're talking about stopping. Here we're talking about coming to a standstill, waiting. In fact, one of our important parts of the religious life is to wait patiently for him. The hymn, yeah. The song goes, wait patiently for him. Wait patiently. How do you wait patiently? When we're anxious to get there, when we're anxious to be to somebody else, when we're anxious to do things, how do we wait patiently? It takes some doing, it takes some practice, but we're all enriched by it. Silence is an enriching experience. wait on the silence.
I mean, I love, there's a quote by a writer by the name of Jan Richardson, as you were talking about this. It reminded me of that, where she often talks about, we make the mistake of thinking silence is somehow shutting down all of the thoughts, all of the noise, all of the chaos. And she said that's impossible. So she says it's trying to slip beneath the chaos. And she said, let there be an opening into the quiet that sits beneath the chaos, where you will see what shimmers within the storm, and you will find the peace you didn't think possible.
They're good ideas, aren't they? Powerful ideas to allow things that weren't there before to simply be there. We often are so geared to, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. But here we're talking about just being. Be still. Be quiet and allow things to happen. Allow the goodness of life to unfold. Be still. Isn't there a quotation there? Be still and know that I am God. That says it all, doesn't it? In the stillness, you find the presence.
Yeah. One of my practices when I want to be still is I actually use that quotation. And where I start with be still and know that I am God, and I just peel parts of it off. So I start with be still and know that I am God. And then I go to be still and know that I am. Then I go to be still and know. Be still. Be. Then I take 5 deep breaths and I do it again. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. So it kind of just grounds me in being. I find that a helpful practice.
Yes, that's right. And it's good that we use the word practice, because often we don't realize it takes practice. We need to practice it. So we commend that to other people. Practice being still. Practice switching off all the other activity and being present, first of all, to yourself, being present to the other person, being present to life, being present to the mystery, the God beyond us, being present.
I often, my understanding too of that phrase, be still and know that I'm God, the be still part, I learned that the Hebrew is probably best translated as quit trying so hard. I learned that it's sort of like cease striving, cease grasping, which then makes me wonder whether the next P, the gift you won't find under a tree or you can buy in the store, is if part of ceasing grasping, I can even feel that, I can feel the tension even by that word of grasping, is I'm wondering if it's giving yourself permission this time of year, giving yourself permission to let go of all those unrealistic expectations. I think we grasp and we strive, particularly this time of year, because we seem to be filled with so many unrealistic expectations of ourselves and of others. I often think that stress is the picture in your head of what you think, of who you think you should be, who you think other people should be, and how you think life should be. And the picture in your head rarely matches the reality you're experiencing, partly because we expect it to be that picture we have in our head. So I'm curious if one of the best gifts we can give ourselves and one another is permission to be human, permission to be flawed, permission to be imperfect, permission to forgive ourselves for being imperfect. Because I suspect if we haven't forgiven ourselves for being imperfect, we're not very likely to forgive others, or not very likely to give other people permission to just simply be human. What do you think?
What do I think? What do we think? You're talking, and I'm thinking, what am I going to say next? Where are we going to go from here? So very quickly, although we're talking about being still, being quiet, we're all also engaged in an activity of saying, what will I do next? What are you thinking? What should I say? So we quickly get jammed up in our own expectations, in what we think other people's expectations are. What do we say? We don't know what we're saying. Instead of saying, let me sit back for a minute. And if I sit back for a minute and say, what do I want to say? Well, if I do that, I say, the thing I want to say is, one of our most important gifts at Christmas or at any other time is simply to be present in an affirming, kindly, positive way to the other person. And the other person can be next to you, or it can be thousands of miles away. How to be present in an affirming, joyous way.
Mm-hmm.
A great gift that needs practice, because very quickly we get caught up in the activity, caught up in what I should do, what I should not have done, whatever. How to pause for a moment and just be present.
Yeah, we do should on ourselves a lot, don't we? We should do this, we should be that way. And I'm curious if one of the best ways we can be really present, letting go of our expectations of how we think other people should be, is to be a little kinder to ourselves, to allow ourselves to be human, I guess. I came across Tracy Blackman is a clergy person, and I came across this writing today that she wrote where she called it a love note to yourself, where she said, it's okay to grieve your losses unapologetically. It's okay not to be strong when your heart is shattered. It's okay for things not to be good right now. Actually, it's more than okay. It's human. We don't need any more superheroes. God is enough. But what we do need is more healthy human beings. And I love that.
What is a healthy human being? How will we put words around that? What is a healthy human being? A human being that accepts their humanness. A human being that says it's okay to be who I am today. A human being, what is it to be a human being? A good human being. A human being who will accept the other person, who will accept herself. It takes doing, doesn't it?
Well, what's really interesting is how it seems like we often present to each other, or try to present to each other, our strength and our perfection. when probably the thing we most share in common is our vulnerability and our humanness. I mean, I think of the Christmas story, that again, the mythology of the Christmas story that says that the child was born and laid in a manger, which is such a quaint, sentimental little word, right? But it's actually an animal's feeding trough. So you can imagine, you know, I get the Christmas card with this perfect scene of an angelic baby and a beautiful wooden crib, and, you know, parents who don't look stressed at all. But you can almost imagine if the mythology and the story, so if the child was laid in an animal's feeding trough, there's a good chance that the saliva from the oxen that had just eaten there was still glistening. There's a good chance that the cow manure, the steam was rising in the air from the cold air from the cow manure. I mean, we're told they traveled from Nazareth to Bethlehem, which is roughly about 80 miles by foot. There's a good chance they had nothing left, that they were beyond exhausted, because the story says they weren't provided a comfortable place to rest. So what's interesting is if we take the mythology of the story, it suggests that the sacred is present right there in the mess and the muck and the crap. That we don't find the holy and the perfect, but in the imperfect, in the mess, in the muck. In fact, there's no such thing as perfect. And that's where we'll find the holy, the sacred, in the messiness. What do you think?
I think your words are excellent, really excellent. If we pause for a moment and see the reality of where we are and where we've been, and to say, how can we be in that and at the same time perceive the possibility of being different, being bigger, not better, if you like, but being within our possibility rather than within the crass reality all the time. How can we pause and be embraced by something bigger than ourselves? I'd like that.
And I think it seems the capacity to somehow be bigger, to be enlarged, seems to be intertwined with also giving ourselves permission to be diminished and to be imperfect and to be human. It's like it seems like when we feel broken and imperfect is when we most need grace. And that's often when we most judge ourselves harshly. But it's when we most need acceptance, and we most need that somehow to grasp this idea that the holy, the sacred is present to you in your brokenness. And that's what will help you to be whole. And that when others are broken and imperfect, they don't need our judgment, our expectations. They need our mercy and our grace.
Does it come easily? Does it happen without any effort? Or do we have to wait on it? Do we have to not only wait on it, but to take time to allow it to unfold? Take the time to allow it to enrich us. Is that possible?
I love the idea of creating space and allowing it to unfold. There's a poem by Morgan Harper Nichols that I'm a big fan of, where she wrote, "You have never shamed the waves for not arriving on the ocean shore any sooner than they were meant to. You have never looked above you to guilt the clouds for taking their time as they cross the noonday sky. You simply accept these clouds must travel at whatever pace they need to. Oh, what a difference it would make if you gave yourself and others this same grace.
Great words. Good words. We need them. So what's the future?
I don't know about the future, but maybe this Christmas, if we could be intentional about the presence, that positive presence, that good spirit, if we could create a little bit of peace and stillness, to find that tranquility within ourselves, that we can actually offer that presence of peace to others. And if we could let go of those unrealistic expectations and extend each other a little bit of grace, allowing ourselves to be human and allowing one another to be human and imperfect, to recognize that the sacred and the holy is not some other place. It's right there in the midst of the muck. Maybe then we'll realize how little we need, how much we actually have, and the true value of human connection.
It's really accepting what has already been given, isn't it? If we can pause a while. Christmas is a time for everybody to be busy. But supposing we add to that, it is also a time to be quiet. It is also a time to reflect what has been given, who we are, and what we yet might be. So we can do both by being alive to all the business, at the same time being aware of what is given, what is there, waiting for us. Can be both.
Well, I'll finish with Mary Oliver, one of my favorite poets. She wrote instructions for living a life. And I often think about, again, before I share her words, back to the mythology of the story of the shepherds. Talk about the shepherds in the field. In that day, from what I understand, were considered the lowliest of the low, work in the night shift, talk about the muck and the mess. But somehow they experienced the message of peace in the midst of all of that. And then they were told, then they said, we need to go and open our hearts to this thing. And they were changed as a result of it. So Mary Oliver said, instructions for living a life, 3 things. Pay attention. Pay attention. Be astonished. And tell others about it. Pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it.
Well, they're good words for everybody to wrap themselves around or take hold of them, digest them. Say them again for me.
It's called Instructions for Living a Life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it.
Yeah, good. Very good. Yeah, often we're so busy we don't do any of those. So be part of those 3 things.
Well, I think back to that Christmas, back to the mythology of that story. We're told that, the shepherds had this experience of these messengers of peace that brought them to the sacred in the midst of the muck and the mess. But then I often wonder, well, that means a whole lot of other people missed it. Somehow a whole lot of other people were too busy, too distracted, and they missed this holy moment. They missed the possibilities in this holy moment. So my message would be, let's be present to one another. Let's carve and create some space and stillness. Let's let go of all those expectations so we don't miss it. Whatever it is, we just don't miss it.
Don't miss it. What don't we miss? A special moment. Be present to each other. A special moment. A good word spoken. Special moment. All those things happen to us every day and we miss them.
Yeah.
So perhaps we need to add, don't miss it. Don't miss it. Because it happens and we're likely to miss it. Great talking to you.
Well, let me end. I didn't miss it. For me, this was a special moment, and I truly value our connection. It's a gift. It's a gift I'm deeply grateful for. And Merry Christmas.
Oh yeah. Don't forget, to you and all your folk, have a very happy Christmas and anticipation for a new year. Okay, goodbye.
Well, that's the end of all sessions for 2021. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Stephen, for another very informative and I think wide-ranging conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed it. The OAR program will now take a break for January of 2022, and we hope to be back with you again in February of 2022. Until then, a Merry Christmas to everybody, a safe and happy New Year, and keep well. Bye now.